what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all good and nobody gets the COVID. In this video, I will show you the way I create a wood terrarium. Before I begin, I want to talk about 2 points. First, we reached 10,000 subscribers on the channel and this is cool. Thanks to all people who support me, you are great. Second point, I'm working on an Excel file for those of you who are interested in. An Excel file which calculates all dimensions of each piece to build the Euro-style glass terrarium I made in one of my previous videos. Some of you ask me on social network to calculate dimensions of your tank, but it is time consuming and I can't do this for you. I will make it available on my old website as soon as possible, but for now I'm struggling with the latest version of WAMP server to update it locally, so I'm stuck. But I will probably make a very short video of 2 or 3 minutes to introduce you to the tool when my website will be updated. Let's go back to the topic. I'm going to show you how I make a wooden Euro-style terrarium. I decided to cut this topic into several parts for budget reasons, so in this first part we will talk about materials, assembly, and I will show you the assembly of the structure, then we will see in the other videos the rest of the construction, the waterproofing, the light top and everything else. I will make a quick point on the materials, and then on the type of assemblies, and some of you could find this part boring, so feel free to fast forward the video a little if you want. To begin, when we talk about a wooden terrarium, it is actually an abuse of language. We are going to use a wood derivative. I strongly advise you to avoid building a terrarium with solid planks of solid wood, even in glued laminated. Solid wood, even with low humidity such as oak or chestnut, retracts or swells, according to the temperature and humidity. This creates movements in the structure of the wood and generates dimensions variations, sometimes up to centimeters, and of course cause significant damage to the tank. So we are focused on wood derivatives. The most common and easy to find in do-it-yourself stores are MDF, plywood, particle board, and OSB. The MDF, to be honest, it's a risky stuff to make a tropical terrarium. However, it is the one I prefer, it is one of the cheapest, and above all, it allows the most beautiful finishes. But it is probably the most sensitive to moisture, a little contact with water and it swells. So use it only if you know how to waterproof your tank perfectly. This is the wine I chose for my large Dart Frog terrarium that you could probably see if you were on my Pinterest profile. Plywood is probably the second in terms of price if you stay on the standard, because there are a lot of variations, such as the film plywood used by some aquarists to make very large wooden aquariums. The price depends on the type and can rise very quickly to more than $150 per square meter. If you are not sure of you, choose plywood. It is easy to work, allows good finishing, and is less sensitive than the MDF in contact with water. The OSB is more expensive, it is very subjective, but I find the aesthetic aspect really not beautiful. And to get a very aesthetic rendering for your interior, you will be forced to cover it with coating, for example, to get a flat surface. But it has the advantage of being quite insensitive to water. Particle board, in my opinion, it is the worst for this use. It crumbles quickly, and is also very sensitive to moisture. To sum up, if you are just starting out or are not sure of yourself, I strongly advise you to go on plywood. If you have the budget, choose plywood for outside. For this video, I choose the water repellent MDF. For the structure, I go on the same system as in my glass terrarium tutorial, except that we will add an integrated light canopy and an opening at the back of it. This will allow us to remove the heat from the future lighting as well as the humidity of the tank. This will avoid having to mount fans that can generate noise. By the way, if some of you are interested in having the 3D models I present in my videos, I can export them in a standard format and make them available on my site. It's up to you to tell me in the comments. The size of the tank is 40 by 40 by 60 cm, but in the interior. To simplify things, dimensions are given by the base. Apart from the bottom that is 15 mm and the lower face that is 10 mm, all the parts have a thickness of 12 mm. Finally, I have the following pieces to cut. Before assembling, I need to trace. Here I trace the lower face on the bottom. It is not really a fun step, but it permits to spot the location of the parts in order to be able to position them and especially screw in the right place. In this case, in the middle, to avoid unpleasant surprise of a screw that comes out, bursting everything. Preferably use this type of square in order to have parallel paths, and don't press too hard so you don't mark your material, above all if it's plywood. Remember to check first and foremost that your parts are well squared in order to avoid trouble afterward. It is essential. On this example, I trace the location of the lower face, so I know that I have only to drill in the center. As usual, I make a blank assembly to see if everything aligns pretty much correctly, which is not always easy when it's not you who make the cuts, but it looks okay. We are now able to move on to assembly. Without wanting to do a carpentry course, it sounds interesting to me to take a look at some assemblies. Feel free to move forward if necessary. I won't talk about all, the idea is not to be exhaustive, but to review the most common ones. Spline joint, super clean, but requires a router and wooden end screw clamp to hold the tank while bonding, so it's not possible for me because I don't have the stuff. Dowels requires a jig to be sure that all are precisely aligned, and end screw clamp. Biscuits, super clean also, but requires a biscuit joiner and end screw clamps. Pilot holes and screws, it's less clean and requires more work of finishing, but it is the screws that hold the whole thing, so I choose this option. Here I'm going to use a 3mm drill. Since I choose 3x25 screws, this kind of drill bit allows me to mill to white screw head afterwards. Now I can drill a hole and mill in the same time. A little test. All is good. Here I'm going to use white vinyl glue. After dusting with a damp cloth, I pass the sides of the pieces to stick. I start with the lower face side that is leaning on the bottom. You will notice that this piece is plywood of 10 and not in water repellent MDF, for the good reason that in the store where I did make the cut, they did not want to make a piece of 8 cm wide. So thanks to the seller of the second store, who agreed to cut 8 cm, but they didn't have plywood available. Also, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but my piece of plywood is slightly curved. I'm going to try to remedy when screwing, but I have to remove the excess glue with a damp cloth or damp sponge to see my marking lines. Think again to check your square. It's super important, especially for this piece. I forgot to record the sound, but now we just have to screw. I stick the rest of the pieces thinking about not ending up with the centerpiece. I have to end up on one side. Also, remember to outcropping the pieces at the front, so that if there is a size gap somewhere, it is only visible from behind the tank. I repeat myself, but think about ending up with a side, otherwise you will be annoyed with central parts. Also remember to remove the drippings with a damp cloth or sponge, so you don't have to remove everything with a wood chisel afterwards, it's time consuming. We have now to wait, but it looks good. We can now fill the holes for obvious aesthetic reasons. I use wood filler paste from Saint-Aubois with hardener. Why with hardener? Because standard wood filler has the unfortunate tendency to retract, so it is necessary to pass a second layer and you waste your time. As for an epoxy resin, it is better to put a little too much hardener than not enough. Otherwise, the wood filler will never dry and you will have to remove everything, scrap everything and start over. Once the mixture is made with the hardener, there is only to clog with a spatula and wait until everything is perfectly dry. For the last stage of this first part, I scrapped the excess wood filler with a scraper, and then sanded the whole tank successively with 40 sandpaper, 80 sandpaper, and 120 sandpaper. To get a smooth surface that will be easier to paint, make sure the wood filler paste no longer feels to the touch. We are done with the structure of the tank and therefore the first video of this series. On the next one, we will attack at least the paint, the creation of lower arc grid, and more according to the available budget. I hope to be able to do this second part as soon as possible if you were interested in the first part. So let me know and smash the blue thumb and drop a comment, it gives me an help. Take care of yourself, bye!